Right. Off the day, welcome back to the Guam Guy show. I still can't say that without feeling icky. But anyway, today's episode is on corals and restoration. So they're in trouble, and this is the team, or part of the team that's working on taking care of them, helping them come back. Today I am joined with Masha, who graduated with her master's degree in marine sciences from James Cook University in Australia, which I've passed by but never got to go in, so that's really cool. She's also a dive master in the Maldives and led marine restoration efforts there too, so she already comes to the table with some experience. Also joining me is Ashley Castro, who voluntold me to judge a science fair competition. So that was fun. Thanks for that, Ash.
You're welcome.
She's one of Guam's very own, has her Bachelor of Science from right here in the University of Guam. And prior to this, and I think still you're with Micronesia Conservation Coalition?
MCC,
Okay,
yes.
awesome. What do you do there?
Well, I'm a research diver for MCC as well.
Okay, awesome.
I don't know how to go in depth or...
You want
I
to talk?
swim a lot.
Is there mantas involved in that?
There are mantas involved.
How do you not scream mantas like first thing?
I don't.
That's what it is.
It's like you gotta show it off.
I don't know if I could talk about it, honestly.
Oh, okay.
Okay, do I?
Yeah, it's all good. Yeah, you done surveys, right?
Yeah.
You can say that, right?
Okay.
All right, and definitely last but not least, Dr. Lori Raimundo, who has a long storied history here on Guam and in the Philippines. Name is all over the place in the world of corals and reef restoration. Also took a chance on me, so big thank you, Lori, for that. If you probably haven't heard, I don't really talk about it very often, but I actually work with these people here. My friends over here are coworkers, colleagues. I'm on this reef restoration team. That's my nonprofit work. So the Marine Lab, Dr. Lori has contracted some of my time to assist them with some of our restoration efforts. So when I think about coral, I actually think about Pokemon. So I was there at the start of the whole Pokemon revolution when they came out, and myself and other fellow 11-year-old nerds memorized the names and special features and characteristics of every Pokemon there was, and I don't even know how many there are now. And when I think about coral, there's over 1,000?
Probably.
What was your
Getting
favorite
close.
Pokemon, though?
I couldn't choose one. I think I probably just chose Charizard because everybody else was like that. But you got people that nerd out, right, about Pokemon, and I think corals might be one of the first things like that, except they're like real, of course, and yet people who want to go out there, swim, and see every coral that exists and learn what their names are or name them if they don't have names. I want a coral named after me. Lori, do you have a coral named after you?
No, I don't, because I haven't done the work to do that.
So I'm second in line. Okay, got it.
Yeah, you have to kind of do a lot. Or discover one.
All right.
You can discover one, but you can't name it after yourself. That's a rule now.
Really?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So
somebody else has got to name it after you. So you got to get in with somebody who does that stuff.
So you and me will name them after each other. Life
There we
hacks.
go.
All right. So over the episode, we'll be talking about like some of the threats to Guam's reefs and our corals, and then also our restoration efforts, how we're trying to save them and protect the ones that we still have. But I think a good idea would be to just start with some groundwork, just set some foundation about the status of our corals, what corals even are. So Ash, would you like to take a try at that? What are corals at a middle school level explanation,
At a middle school
if you
level,
can? Yeah.
so corals are animals, and they do have these stinging cells used as defense. They are animals and typically look white because of their calcium carbonate skeleton. But, you know, when we're out at the beach in Matapang or Ipao snorkeling, you can see that they have color, and that is due to their symbiotic algae.
Okay, cool.
Does anyone want to add on to me?
Mosh, you wanna try?
Yeah, sure. So, I guess I have to get a little closer. So we know that corals are animals, and the best way to describe them as reef builders are pretty much they come in, they settle down, and they create these cityscapes underwater. And just like your city in New York City, Los Angeles, it's almost like each coral polyp is a family in an apartment complex, and they're all living together, they're all bringing the resources, and they're all creating this environment where you have fish coming in, and you have all these giant fish and your whale sharks, all your cool fauna coming in into this little ecosystem. I mean, they only make up, what, less than 1% of the world, but they're such an important ecosystem in our world that most of our fisheries rely on them. We rely on them because of our fisheries. Yeah.
Right. I wanna test my explanation because this is how I explain this to kids. So I like to imagine, like, if we look at a coral colony, it's basically, and we call it that because it's not just, it is kind of one thing, but it's also a bunch of little things living together. We call polyps, right? Coral polyps. And I like to think of each individual polyp as basically an upside down jellyfish that grows skeleton. And then that grows skeleton behind it. And as Ashley said, they have stinging cells called nematocysts, just like jellyfish do. That's why I like to think of them that way. And I guess they have that for a couple of reasons. One is they will use their tentacles, their arms, to grab food out of the water and shove them in their mouths, like me at lunchtime.
All of us, to be
All right,
honest.
is that fair, Lori?
Yeah. It's kind of an upside down. It's kind of like a bucket with a bunch of tentacles sticking out of it. So
Yeah.
the tentacles have the nematocysts, which are the stinging cells, which basically kind of stun their prey. So they're looking at tiny, tiny things that float in the water, plankton. And then the tentacles pull them into their gut and digest.
Shall we
yeah.
demonstrate?
No.
I'm gonna be a car.
Wait, they actually, like, things like, can plankton actually get stung?
Well, plankton are stunned by that. I mean, you've been stung by an anemone, right?
Yes.
Corals don't sting as badly as anemones, right? Because and a lot of times their tentacles are retracted into their skeleton, so you don't even see them. They usually come out during the day or during the night. Most of them feed at night.
I think Ash is our resident expert on getting stung. But-
In the face.
in the face.
Stung in the face.
In the
not-
face, yes.
Not just underwater, but on land too.
Oh, yes. Oh, man.
I'm so sorry about that. And we'll just
Clearly.
we'll just leave it hanging there. Next on, Mosh, did you talk about the symbiotic algae? Was that you or was that Ash?
I think that was Ashley, but
I actually mentioned it.
jump on it if you want. Or do
Okay,
you
yeah,
want to jump
sure.
on? Tag team this.
Yeah.
Okay,
Let's
so
actually do
what is I want to talk about? Let's talk about that algae a little bit. What's that algae do?
So, shall I mention the name? Or
Sure, go ahead and try. Yeah, let's try
Okay,
it.
so we have zooxanthellae.
We call them zooks for short.
But zooxanthellae is cooler.
Or symbionts.
So, because of high elevated sea temperatures, this algae within the coral, if it's too hot, the coral will expel the algae in order to survive. And that's what causes the coral to lose their color. So these zooks,
All right.
Are-
What do they do for the coral? Why are they in there? Let's start with that first.
okay. So the zooxanthellae within the coral, so it can provide the nutrients and the food, and it's a symbiotic relationship to both keep both organisms alive. So technically, zooks are important. Very.
Yeah.
It's like a I'll scratch your back if you scratch my back type of relationship. And if you
I
think
like
about
that.
it, yeah. Thank you. I mean, if you think about it as your skin layer, they're right under there, so they're just hanging out inside the coral. And then how Ashley was saying is, unfortunately, when the water warms up, they get too stressed, and they're like, well, you know what, this is too much, I'm going to leave the coral. And the coral technically can eat from the water column, but it mostly relies on these symbionts, or zooxanthellae.
Yeah, I don't know why there isn't like an X-Men or like a Marvel or DC superhero that has they don't have algae growing in their skin and they don't photosynthesize themselves, so it's like you create your own food. That sounds like a superpower to me. But then I recently brought this up, I think a couple days ago, and somebody's like, nuh-uh, what about what's the Batman
The DC,
woman.
we have one in DC.
Poison
Oh,
ivy.
poison ivy,
Poison
yeah.
ivy. I'm like, oh yeah, man, you got me beat there. And somebody else is like, Groot. I'm like, oh, you got
That's
me there
true,
too.
that's
So we
true.
do have superheroes. So corals have these like superhero like powers, and I think that's really cool.
Hey, they are a Pokemon too. I would just like to.
What?
Yeah, I just want to,
Lori's
circle
over
back
here
to
like-
that.
He's like, let's be serious
"Who
here."
did I hire?"
I'm just sitting here laughing.
Actually, it's called Corsola, or Corsola.
Is that a scientific name or is that a Pokemon
No, it's
name?
a Pokemon.
That's a Pokemon name.
And now, as depressing as it is, they have a new one that's Ghost, apparently. I don't know the name of it, but it's a bleached Corsola.
Really?
So we
wow.
incorporated climate change into Pokemon.
We,
Look
oh
how
my god, that's
miserable
so
he looks.
amazing. I need to look this up so we talk about it.
You have to look this up.
on your podcast.
I'm showing it to you right now.
Yeah, well, I want to read more. That's, oh my god, is that...
Happy coral, sad coral.
Okay, I know coral, I know, not corals
Gotta
evolve,
catch 'em
Pokemon evolve. Pokemon evolve, which one comes first, the bleached one or the healthy one?
Oh, the healthy
The
one.
The healthy one's first and it
And
evolves to the
technically-
bleached one?
Oh, I think it's a separate one. I don't.
You don't want to
actually know.
evolve to the bleach.
Yeah, I know, but
I don't know how this
Whoa.
works.
Exactly,
Lori,
exactly.
We will go into Bulbapedia real quick.
Okay.
Just kidding. I
Yeah,
can't
that's all
on
right.
this
That's all
server.
right. Cool. So there were back in my day when they started, there was 150 or 151 Pokemon, depending on how you count it when it started. How many species of coral do we have on Guam, Lori?
Oh man, you asked me the hardest question.
Isn't
Better
it
you
like
than
is it in
me.
the
I don't.
hun-
I
is it in
don't
the
know. I
hundreds?
mean, there's yes. Oh yeah.
It's in the
Yeah.
hundreds,
Yeah.
yes.
Well over. Oh goodness. I mean, they're still figuring that.
It's
ask the
okay.
genetics people, we haven't even figured all that
Masha's
out yet.
Googling it for you.
Would you like me to tell you?
No, because that's not even going to be correct.
I know.
Let's just
No,
let's-
we have. I mean, there's over 500 species that we know of in the world,
really.
and on Guam we probably have over 300.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice. This
At this counting.
this Guampedia article has us at 377.
Yeah,
Also,
yeah,
that's-
that sounds.
I felt like it was around 400, and because I like to brag that we have like 10 times as many coral as the Atlantic or the Caribbean. They have like 40,
Yeah,
right?
they have about 80 species in the Caribbean.
80? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So we're
And
also
in
not
the-
hot tub.
Well, actually, no, in the world it's probably closer, goodness, how much is it? Maybe close to 700 or 800 now. Everything's, being renamed. Just when I think I know them all, then they go and change the names.
Yeah, I have
Which
such
really
a,
sucks, but.
I have such a gripe about this because I finally got like my first coral, my first staghorn coral. I could properly ID with 100% confidence. I got the name down. I can look at it and know what it is, and they changed the name. So
Which one was that?
microphthalma to microphthalma to vergata.
Oh, well,
At least
we all have to deal with that.
That's a little jump, so it's okay.
All right. And I imagine we might have lost some people by now just talking about corals, but we got to plug why corals are important, why the reefs in particular are important for people, for communities, for families, for jobs, and so on. So anybody want to take a stab at why people should care about corals and how it affects them in their lives or their professions?
I think Lori does.
Lori does?
Oh,
Okay.
God. Well, we always tend to think about nature in terms of how it serves us. So I understand why that question is important, and I intend to answer it, but I also invite people to start thinking in terms of, well, maybe we don't have to keep thinking in terms of why is it important to us. The question probably should be, why do we have to keep destroying things? Why can't we be a little bit more careful and a little bit more respectful? I mean, the reality is we're going to disappear long before the planet does. We're already driving ourselves, like into bad places, as we know. I mean, climate change is a real thing. We're all having to face the fact that it's a real thing. And so the question is, can we control our behavior enough to heal things so that the planet remains healthy for everyone, including us? So if things don't stay healthy, we don't stay healthy either. Think about what happens to you if you move to a big city that has like all kinds of air pollution, and how you start getting sick all the time. You start getting respiratory diseases. So the reef is just one of these things that keeps our planet working and healthy. On a more local level, in Guam, just think about how fishing is such an important cultural thing,
Yes.
but it's also part of our food sustainability. I mean, we're a small island, and we have to think about how to sustain, life on Guam, and getting our fisheries back into a healthy place is a really important thing. We don't want that to keep going down. We want it to start getting healthier. And so corals create, as Masha was saying, the apartment complexes in which everything lives. And the cool thing about corals is that they're living like your bones are. So when you break a bone, it heals if it's treated properly. And corals can do the same thing. They can heal if they're treated properly, and they can also grow. I mean, we grow to a certain height and then we stop. Corals never stop growing. So they just continue to build and build and build. And so they create these structures that are, well, we've talked about fisheries. We can mention how just recreational and educational they are,
They're
that
pretty.
we spend a lot of time exploring them. A lot of people on island love to explore them, and our tourists come
Yeah, absolutely.
because they want to explore them too. So that's an economic, thing. And
yeah,
the
Mosh and I came from the recreational dive industry, so we know all about that tourism, and like that was literally like our jobs, and we got paid to do that. So that's also an industry within itself. So just that alone, I think, to make the selfish appeal of why someone should care about coral they might not otherwise, I think that's a pretty important factor.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go to GVB's annual reports, I've done that on kind of a regular basis. And in general, when we had tourists, they're starting to come back, so we will get them back. I think it was something like 75 to 80% of tourists that come to Guam come because they want to interact in some way with nature.
Absolutely.
And the vast majority of them come here because of our beaches and our reefs. So that's a pretty huge economic reason why we need to preserve them for us.
Do you
You
know
know.
what the number one tour on Guam, I guess, was before COVID? I know this.
You
I'm
mean
lying.
how many people came?
Like, yeah,
What-
people
God,
doing a
what-
tour,
it
like
was
a
getting up
particular
there.
tour.
Was it
It was like 20 million?
No.
Was
no,
it?
No, an optional tour, something a tourist would come here to do.
Oh, yeah.
What is it?
It was dolphin watching.
Oh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we had a lot of dolphin watching boats, and I think Vic behind the camera, you used to work with one of those boats, right?
Yeah,
am I
yeah.
right? Want to just that sounds right. Yeah. So you gotta we would get we had there was one guy who was a boat owner talking to me, and he was all like, you're a dive instructor, you can have like 4 to 8 packs, 4 to 8 people at a time, but if you have a boat, you can have a crew, you can have a captain, a deckhand, and you can have 30 to 50 people on your boat. So it's like it makes a good amount of business sense, and that's all an underwater ecosystem, and it's all that circle of life stuff. So we need healthy coral, healthy reefs for everything to function, right? We want to jump in there, Mosh?
Yeah, absolutely. So jumping back onto the dive industry and really introducing people into the oceans, I think it's really hard for a lot of people who are living inland somewhere in the mountains to really have that emotional attachment to the ocean. Guam here, I mean, all of us have some degree of that emotional attachment to the ocean, because it's either livelihoods, we've either, go surfing on the weekends, stand-up paddleboarding, diving. But people who don't have access to it and then come out here to experience this, I think it's super important having that tourism industry, and I mean, of course, being responsible with it, but having this industry support these people going out and really connecting with the ocean, understanding why we care about it. And once you have and establish that emotional attachment to something, you want to share it with others. And then all of a sudden you have this little spider network of people connecting and talking about preserving our ocean and our diversity. And I think with coral reefs, it's absolutely important, because they're our heart. Coral reefs are the heart of the ocean. And if we lose them, we lose everything.
That was deep.
Nice.
I try once in a while.
Okay.
That was deep. Wow.
All right, all right, so before we move on to kind of the threats and some of the issues facing the reefs and facing corals, any thoughts to round off what corals are or anything in that realm?
Well, I think
We can move on if not.
Yeah,
It's all
I think
good.
we can move on.
We
All
can
right.
just talk all day about it.
So I want to play a video here from our master's student, Grace McDermott. Did I say that right? And so I'll play this and we'll react to it.
Just like humans, corals have their very own microbiome. A microbiome is a community of microorganisms that live on or inside them. Corals' microbiome can get pretty complex. It can include bacteria, fungi, algae, and even include an abundance of different viruses. However, when a coral's delicate microbiome is disrupted, they can't just pop a few probiotics like we can. Instead, corals can get very sick with disease, leading to a lot of die-off within coral reef communities. Erosion from irresponsible development, pollution, overfishing, and climate change are all major contributors to increasing levels of coral diseases here on Guam. The most common coral disease here is called white syndrome. It's called that because you can actually see patches of exposed white coral skeleton instead of nice and healthy pigmented tissue. While we don't know a lot about white syndrome and what it is exactly, we do know that there are several species of bacteria that are often found around the white patches. We also think that certain species of coral seem more resilient than others to the white syndrome disease. My research focuses on one species of finger coral called Parietes cylindrica. You can find it on the west side of the island at places like Fisheye, Tumon, and Cocos Lagoon. It occurs in two different colors on Guam, brown and yellow. I'm looking to see if one of these colors is more resilient to stress than the other. So one of the ways I've been doing that is by snorkeling around Guam, finding big patches of finger coral and measuring how much disease is on each color coral. I've also been running experiments at the UOG Marine Lab. In one of these experiments, I tried to make healthy coral sick on purpose by putting them in contact with diseased coral and then heating up the water. As a control, I also put healthy corals together. Unfortunately, I didn't get the results that I wanted from this experiment, as my previously healthy corals that were supposed to stay healthy ended up developing disease lesions halfway through the experiment. Doing this kind of research is important as it helps us better understand coral resilience so that we can better protect coral reefs in the future.
So there was something mentioned in there that's we're kind of used to down here, but I don't think most people have any idea about. Corals get diseases.
Yeah, they're animals. Everything that's alive gets diseases.
You're blowing my mind right now. That's true. Wow. Yeah, because I can think of like plant diseases, papaya, mango. Yeah.
COVID.
Too soon.
Yeah, we're animals too. Sure. And she was just talking about one called white syndrome. I think she talked about it a little bit, but what does that look like? How can you tell white syndrome from something else? Because there's a bunch of things that look white. Corals, a bunch of the times corals look white for, I guess, a handful of reasons. So what makes white syndrome look like white syndrome?
Well, that's a really good question. So it takes a little bit of practice to kind of figure that out. So it's kind of like a detective sort of decision tree that you have to go through when you're looking at them underwater. And because sometimes there are predators that bite and remove tissue that look like that too. And, you know, corals bleaching turn white as well. So there's a lot of different causes. But you kind of get used to sort of seeing what it looks like. It's really exposed skeleton. It's white exposed skeleton that then gets covered over by algae within like a week or so. But the thing about diseases, about infectious diseases especially, is that they can spread
Infectious
between.
diseases.
Yeah, they spread
Coral
between
infectious
corals.
diseases. Wow. Yeah.
Yep,
Mind blown over here.
yep. So they can transfer it to, you know, a neighboring colony, but they can also get sick with some diseases from the water itself because bacteria are in the water. And so you kind of have to look for signs that it's spreading or progressing through a colony. So you may end up with like start out with a small lesion and then it spreads over time. And a predator bite wouldn't do that. So a predator bite would just be a predator bite. And maybe the skeleton would get munched as well. So when we go underwater to look at this stuff, we nerd out by bringing magnifying lenses, and we get real up close and personal, and we stare at things, small things. And there's all those exciting sharks and turtles and stuff swimming around behind us, and we're completely oblivious because we're staring at the coral with our mag lenses all the time.
Yeah. Speaking of bites, this is a horrible example. This is a horrible example to bring up, but you ever like bite an apple and try to see like the pattern of your teeth in the skin when it breaks?
No.
Only Ash,
Nope.
okay.
Yeah, I see the bottom part is a little bit crooked. I'm like, oh.
Oh, I used to do that way before I had braces. Oh, when I had braces, I did it.
Okay.
Yeah, because I would see how my teeth were
So-
getting straight and
Whoa.
That's how I
Not
think
a long
about
time ago.
the different fish that like
So you're a
will like a parrotfish and their gap teeth, right? Like
Oh, I see what you're saying.
their
Don't hate on the parrotfish.
bite marks on the corals. So yeah,
yeah,
you
you can tell what fed on the coral by looking at the bite marks.
Yeah, mine are similar to the Triton triggerfish.
could your bite marks on
we
an
all
apple.
know about that one.
Was that Fran, would you like to demonstrate one more time and get the ASMR version of it?
Oh my God, my Titan trigger impersonation. I don't have my keys. Yeah, maybe we'll loop that in later on. So yeah, you got fish that like eat or scrape at the coral. You have those little weird snails, Drupella.
Drupella.
They eat some coral. Other reasons they might be white. Of course, we just talked about white syndrome, and two other things. One would be like crown of thorns, right? It's those crazy starfish or sea stars with all the spikes all over it, and they'll like extrude their guts and start digesting the living tissue in the coral. And I can tell when it's that or versus bleaching, because when it's the crown of thorns starfish, you can see they're very sharp line between what's been eaten and what's not, like perfectly healthy right next to like totally white if you catch it within like I guess a couple of days, whereas if it was, let's say, bleached, you'd see not so sharp lines, or the entire colony would be with the colony entire
And there's
colony
still
would be
tissue.
white. Mm-hmm.
Plus you got that path of destruction, and then you see it just sitting at the end. You're like, yes, this is you foraging
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
if it's
you
a
can see
big
the scars.
colony, you see
Yeah.
like scalloped edges because they go munch, 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 munch.
Old
So-
Wives has so many of them. I don't know if you've been out there.
Yeah, there was a
It's bad.
Oh, we should
Yeah.
tell the
There-
guys who were doing the surveys.
Yeah, there was an effort a couple years ago where the Navy divers got, I want to say, like 190 something in one day, right outside of Old Wives Beach. So that was it's a serious thing. We lose a lot of coral from that, especially historically on the east side. I do have there are some projects happening with this, and we'll talk about that in another episode, which is going to be really cool. And then, of course, climate change. So we talk about bleaching. So what's causing that bleaching? I don't know, Mosh, you want to try that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ashley did a pretty good job at touching on it earlier.
That's
but
right, yeah.
going back to that symbiotic relationship with the algae under the coral skin, pretty much, when they're stressed out, whether it's because it's too warm or, corals are pretty temperamental. I would say they're pretty, princess behavior sometimes.
They're very sassy.
They are very sassy. Each species feels sassy too. But when they get upset, we're still looking into whether it's the coral that kicks out the algae or if it's the algae that breaks up with the coral, but they go into the water column and leave the coral, and then the poor coral's sitting there and starving a little bit. So then at that point, it's relying on its resources of any fats or lipids that it had before, and then it's feeding from the water column a little bit, and it's waiting for these algae to come back. So the good news is the algae can come back. Hopefully it comes back in time when the coral isn't too stressed and it's not dying. So
Yeah, that's like us when we're on a diet. We like try to digest our own fat, right? We metabolize our own fat to try to lose weight. And then I guess one more major contributor for threats to the reef. There's probably more. We're not listing here, but we call land-based sources of pollution. And so this is something you see all the time, really. It's, obviously marine debris that washes down the rivers or comes in from overseas, or stuff that, or sediment, or erosion, stuff that washes down the rivers from whatever disturbs the ground, irresponsible.
Fertilizer.
Yeah. Oh yeah, fertilizer.
Another
Sewage.
stressor.
Other kind of chemical stressors. What was that, Lori?
Sewage.
Sewage.
Yeah.
That's
Extra fertilizer, the spicy kind.
oh yeah, nasty. And so I don't know if you guys have seen this, but I was outside of Sedza Bay one time. This was in must have been 2009 or 10, and I remember it stood out to me because this is when I started really exploring the island, and it was the first place I'd been without any kind of human trash, and all the corals were just gorgeous, beautiful. And I went back a couple of weeks later, and in between there was a really hard rain that passed through, and I went back out, and every surface of the coral was covered in dirt and sediment and little bubbles, which I can only assume are the bacteria and whatever microorganisms in the soil kind of dying or digesting and producing gas. And it just looked like a nightmare. Like if you've seen like Marble Cave, this was my first kind of experience on that level to me. So yeah, when they're like that, they can't eat food out of the water, and they can't their plant cells can't make food from the sun, because they've just kind of been coated and buried in all this sediment. So yeah, we got a real big responsibility to take care of our stuff on land, to protect our stuff in the water. That said, there are people doing that, like Guam Forestry. So massive shout out to them. They're kind of my heroes. I'm such a fanboy for their work. I wish we could support them more and more and more. I think we're good to kind of move on to the fun stuff we get to do, the really fun stuff we get to do, restoration. Any other major threats that I missed? I hope.
We have some local stressors too. We have overfishing that's an issue on the island.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We recently had that scuba ban petition. Scuba fishing.
Yeah.
Scuba spearfishing.
Exactly.
Ban.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, as a local, we also have to play a part to protecting the reefs as well, and seeing how much we can take and when we should take, or what sizes we should be taking away. It's a big responsibility on your part as well.
On all our parts, yes. Yeah, thanks. I don't know how I missed that. Anything else I missed majorly? That's a pretty big one.
I think we got most of it.
I think you got most of it,
Okay.
Overfishing and
Cool.
silt and sewage and nutrients coming in. And, so those are more the local ones, the ones that we can actually do something about locally. That's one thing that we want to remember, is that local stressors we can do something about.
Especially,
can
yes,
plastic.
Pass laws, we
anthropogenic
can
effects,
enforce laws.
stepping on coral.
Yeah.
Yeah, stepping on coral.
Going back to the dive industry, the dark side of the dark industry, or the dive industry, is the unfortunate miseducation of a lot of our tourists coming in and not understanding what a rock versus a coral is, and being able to identify where they can stand up versus where they shouldn't be touching. I know that's been a big issue through my career, is just being like, hey, don't touch the coral just because there's so many people touching them. You're introducing your own bacteria into it. You're causing
I didn't think
physical
about that,
stress
yeah.
on that. Yeah, so it's unfortunate side of the industry, but I think with a lot of local guidance and clear direction, it's something we can overcome.
Yeah, I think somebody is working on. There's if you're going to be a tour guide, you have to take some kind of tour guide course with. I think it's with GVB, and I think somebody's working on that for a marine version. Is that anybody familiar with that?
I haven't heard of anything actually happening, but what I do, I totally agree with our dive operators being our frontline, empowered people to teach our visitors what to do and what not to do. So it's got to start, visitors are going to come in from all over the place. You have no idea where they came from, what kind of training they've had. You don't know anything about
we
them.
should assume
but you
absolutely
want them
none.
here,
Absolutely.
And some of them are learning how to dive here, right?
Yeah.
So it's up to our dive guides to just empower themselves and inform themselves also to say, hey, please don't do that. That's not acceptable. Because in places like the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, where they have a lot of control and their dive guides are pretty empowered, and they literally say, you can't do that. And they'll stop people underwater. And that they have things that are in better shape and they can handle, a lot of divers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Plus, you kind of turn into the role where, I feel like with the dive industry, you are the role models. They're the people coming in, they see these divers, and they're the first line of defense for our corals. They're the ones that are going to be educating, and they're going to be the ones that are playing role model for them and saying, this is what you can do. And it's a student-teacher role, too. I know when I first started diving, I didn't know what I was doing, so I was watching my instructor. And whatever they did, I mirrored. And if they're touching coral, of course I didn't touch the coral, but I'm just saying as an example, if they're
We have
touching
photos
the
of
coral,
that, too. We have photos. I've seen dive guides take someone's hand and put it on the coral.
oh no.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah, but
Yep.
they're saying, yes, this action is okay, versus if somebody is, a new student is doing something and a dive instructor comes over and says, hey, don't do that. It's,
It's going to have a
not
big
great.
impact.
Yeah, I mean, it's the little steps. Like when I was working in the Maldives, we'd have a lot of our tourists come in, and I'd do a quick introductory. This is the Maldives, this is how it's formed, and this is the appropriate behavior we want to see when you're interacting with the corals or the mantas or when you're on the boat. And it's just like an easy A, B, C, D, don't do this, this is okay.
Yeah, Ashton Williams, Marine Lab graduate, she did her project on that, and I think all she really did was, I don't want to I'm going to oversimplify here, but what she did was she'd go on the dive boats and just try to see if she could improve diver behavior just by including 1 or 2 sentences in the boat captain or the dive master's briefing, and it actually saw a difference. So, like, you're right on the money, yeah.
It's baby step, it's little things, just being like, hey, don't touch the coral. And most of the time, people are going to be super receptive because you're in that leadership role, so they're not going to go against you because you're the one out there giving the instructions. I mean, occasionally you get 1 or 2 customers that are like, oh, I'm not touching a coral, I touched a rock, and you just kind of have to navigate, eloquently around it or try to be kind about it. But for the most part, I think most people are super interested in getting to know the reef and interacting with it in like a healthy way.
Yeah, that said, as restorationists, we touch a lot of coral just as a necessity for our job, but it's all for the good. We actually don't kill much coral. We have a really we save a whole lot of coral. We grow a whole lot more than we harm, which is just a, I guess, spoiler. We actually have to cut the coral. Just pieces at a time, and then we put that in the nursery, and then that's it. We can just keep regrowing from the pieces that we have in the nursery, so we can leave the corals in nature alone. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. I have a video from Renee Chrysostomo, another Marine Lab student here, also one of Guam's very own, and she's going to introduce her project and touch on restoration a little bit too.
The staghorn corals of Guam are at risk. Staghorn acropora species have experienced island-wide losses due to climate change and other human-caused problems, such as pollution and runoff. In order to help save them and work to restore the ecosystem services they provide, our team at the Raimundo Coral Lab have been working on the active restoration and conservation of the most at-risk species with the help of 2 ocean coral nurseries. My research focuses on one species of staghorn coral called Acropora aspera, which is one of Guam's most at-risk staghorn corals, now only reduced to a single surviving patch in the wild. We have taken samples of Acropora aspera from its wild population and placed them in our ocean coral nurseries, where they are allowed to grow large enough to plant back out into our reefs. But we've noticed that the species tends to change in appearance when it spends time in our nurseries and also when we plant them back out again. These changes in appearance are likely due to the environmental shifts the species faces throughout the restoration process. What I'm looking to answer is what kind of effects these changes have on our ability to grow and plant this species and on its continued ability to survive. My hopes are that my research will better inform coral restoration efforts on a local and global scale.
So I probably say this every episode, but if you're just listening, you got to go on YouTube and you got to watch it. You can find it on my channel. You can find it on KUAM's channel. There's some really, I didn't know Renee had such a nice camera. There's some gorgeous, gorgeous imagery in there, and there's also going to be a whole bunch of videos thrown on top too, so you can actually see what we're doing. As you said in the video, we have. Two coral nurseries, one in Cocos Lagoon and the other one in one of the PD misnomer bomb holes. And we have, how many fragments do we have right now between both nurseries? Just a really rough guess. Is
About
it
3,400.
what?
About.
How did you have that ready? You had that ready to go?
I write the reports.
Do you know who she is?
She is loitering.
Do you know who I am? All right, so we have thousands of corals. That is, that's just so cool. Please watch the video so you can see like how awesome this is. All right, and so I see Mosh, you got this spreadsheet all pulled up. So take it away.
Oh, no, it's okay. I think Lori should talk about this. I feel like you've written this down so many times at this point.
Well, what do you want to know?
Okay, so I guess why nurseries? Like what are we trying to do?
Okay. Well, okay, so we had this 5-year period from 2013 to 2017 where every year we were losing coral, like a lot of it. 30 to 40% of what's on Guam's shallow reefs we lost within that 5-year period. That was what we estimated.
Whoa.
So, well, a few of us who were actually quantifying this and going out and diving and all that and trying to figure out what was going on, it was pretty hard to watch. It was really, really hard to watch. And maybe we got to do more than just like watch it die. Maybe we want to do something
Yes.
little. Can we bring any of this back? So the first idea about the nurseries were, can we maybe do some kind of what we call a Noah's Ark sort of thing? So we focused on these staghorns, which, they're called staghorns because they look like deer antlers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're all shallow. So everybody who's snorkeled on Guam's reefs have seen these corals. And we have 8 species. We have a bit more than, a lot of other places. And we decided let's focus on those because that's something I can wrap my brain around, basically. And so we tried getting all species into this sort of safe place. So the nurseries are a little deeper. Well, at least in PD, the water's pretty clean, and we can take care of them there. So it's just like a plant nursery. That's literally what it is. It's a plant nursery. It's like a tree nursery. And we've learned a lot about how to do this on land. So we know about forestry. We know about plant nurseries. We know how to grow trees, and we propagate plants and stuff like that. So this is basically kind of what we're doing. We're using what we've learned on land in the sea, and we're gardening. And that's basically what we're doing. So we're gardening with these species, so we grow them out, so we don't have to take huge chunks from the remaining wild populations. We can take small fragments. So it's not damaging to the parent colony, as you know. They heal pretty quickly if you only take a little bit. And then we can prune them, because like plants, you can get cuttings. So you grow them out in the nursery, they get big, and sometimes they get absolutely huge, because we can't do this fast enough sometimes. It's hard work. And then we can prune them and plant them out. And so it gives a chance for them to get bigger, so that when we plant them out, they're bigger, because they don't do really well when you plant them when they're tiny. Just like plants, you have to take a lot of care when they're really tiny, and the bigger they are, at least to a certain extent, the better they're going to get established, right? So, you put them in bigger and bigger pots and whatever. So that's basically what we're doing. So the nursery is a grow-out phase. It's a protected place where they can grow big, and then we prune them and we plant the cuttings.
Yeah, just to tie that back to, I I guess to land stuff. So we know about the Hudson Lagu, the fire tree up in Anderson, right? That's the last of its kind on Guam, which is, so
Yeah.
there's a lot of attention being paid to it, and I think so. We're trying to avoid situations like that. So Renee's project, the one that she's been working on, we're down to the last wild stand of that, the last wild patch of that. And so we're trying to avoid that kind of situation too. So we have this in both nurseries, right?
We have it in both nurseries. We have some planted in Asan. We have some planted in Pidi, and we have some planted in Cocos and in Tumon. So now from this one remaining population in Achang, it's right near the Manel Channel, we now have 4 different populations aside from that one, and they're all doing pretty well so far. So far.
So this is a big
Fingers
success
crossed.
story. Is it? How come this should be like in newspapers and stuff? So we have this huge success story. We have the coral underwater equivalent of the Hudson Lagu, and we've had it being planted out onto the reef. Man, sometimes we don't appreciate what we do. Sometimes, when we live it. All right, but yeah.
Aw, Farron.
On the with the nurseries, so I would love to have way more nurseries, but there's kind of constraints on how many we can have and even where we can put them
Yeah,
if
where
we
we
want
can
them
put
to
'em.
live. So
That was a hard choice, yeah.
yeah, so Mosh, I think you've had experience with this before, and I think you can apply your observations here now, or even not. But like what are we looking for with a coral nursery location?
Well, I know when Lori first established the nursery, you're concerned about the cyclones that would come through and hit
Called
the
typhoons
island.
here.
Typhoons.
Did she just say cyclones?
It's an Aussie term. It's an Aussie
I
term.
was just thinking about my,
Typhoons.
my beginnings.
Typhoons for the local.
I'm sorry, I know it. I've been here a year
You
and a
just
half.
lost everybody. Thanks. We tease you. This is how you know we're friends.
Yeah, because I get roasted on air this time. Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest concern, of course, was looking at the typhoons that come around so that doesn't yank our coral nurseries straight out of,
Right.
the
They
bomb
crash
holes.
it against a reef or something.
I know. So then the other half is making sure that we don't have tourists coming in, kicking around. So making sure
Yeah.
they don't have direct access to it. I mean, you can definitely swim over there to PD, but for the most part, I don't think they know where the bomb hole is.
They don't know where it is.
It's a local secret. And of course, making sure it's not in front of a river mouth where we get a lot of eutrophication. So we're trying to create this ideal, protected, sheltered area. I mean, when you're young, you want the best conditions. So that's including how deep you want to put it in, how much light it's getting, if it's going to get too warm, and the list continues. So these are definitely all factors that go into selecting a site. And I think Lori and her team, before I got here, did a great job.
Our team, yeah.
Our
Yes.
team, our team.
Yeah, I think that sounds like all the major points to me. Yeah, cool. What was that word you said? Eutrophication?
Yeah.
Did I even say that right?
A little broken up, but yeah.
What does that mean?
So it's just all of the pollution coming off the land,
Okay.
specifically like fertilization and getting your nitrogens introduced in the water, just having excess nutrients that are polluting.
Excess nutrients, yep.
Yeah, and
They're
just
hogging all, yeah.
So yeah, the corals are really good at like maintaining a diet. When you overfeed them, they react bad.
no,
Like-
it's the algae that react.
algae.
Oh, it's the algae
more.
they react
Yeah.
bad.
I
Oh,
mean, the
okay.
corals don't do as well too, but
yeah.
there's a lot of algae.
It's
It's
like-
really good for algae. You're fertilizing it.
Yeah, imagine having this coral and algae living in harmony and having this healthy food served every day, and all of a sudden you have fast food McDonald's coming in from the river, and the algae are like, oh, I gotta get me some of that, so they get out of there real quick.
Yeah.
Be
And
honest
then
though,
when
we eat
you
way more McDonald's than
overfish-
we should.
I would like to preface that one saying Taco
So you've
Bell
got-
is my food choice here.
You've got a situation where, so we've got nutrients coming in, so we're basically fertilizing algae, and then we're taking away the fish that would graze on the algae. So algae grows a lot faster than corals, and this is something we probably want to remember. So, and algae can irritate them. If you see certain algae, they can smother the coral and kill the tissue underneath. And then some of them are really abrasive and scratchy, so if they're growing next to a coral, they can literally just scratch the tissue off by just going like this against the tissue. And so you've got that going on, and then you remove the fish that can keep the algae grays down, and that's when you get. So it's that double whammy. It's the nutrients from land, and it's the removing of, just over-harvesting the fish.
Are we the drama?
Are we toxic?
Yeah, so all right, we got our nurseries, and then the whole purpose of that is to obviously grow a bunch of coral so we can plant it out. Do we know how much coral we've planted out? How many, I guess, pieces of coral, or how much area?
Miss Cyclone has
She's
it
doing
over
the
there.
Google. Masha's doing the Google.
How much area
Listen.
we've covered? I see your spreadsheet there, yeah.
This is why I make spreadsheets, just for moments like this.
It was,
so,
okay, so the figure that went into our last report. Okay, so over this 3 to 4 year project, we're supposed to do 4 acres, a little over 4 acres, and I think we've done almost 2 at this point of coral. So you don't plant it, I mean, you think of it as something that's going to grow, so obviously you have to give it space. So you don't try to cover the entire ground with coral wall to wall. You plant them in spaces to allow them to grow, and then they'll become this larger thicket if they survive, and we hope that they do. So far, they're doing okay. So, yeah.
So do we get a little drum roll? We ready for it?
Okay.
Is this too much for the microphones?
Sorry.
Now, since the start of your project, way back when, a couple years ago, we are up to 2,538 colonies outplanted in varying sizes.
Well,
Yep.
okay.
2,500? 2,500. Wow, that feels like more. That's a 2,500 pieces of coral. That's like how many grains of rice is like when you eat? You know, that's like there's like that many, except they're big. This is some weird Chamorro math. I'm trying.
Is it cow
That's
roast
like
rice or
comparing
is it?
apples and lawn furniture, Farrah.
Why not? 2,500 corals.
I don't know,
mean,
my hands feel it.
That's
you
amazing.
do?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see. Speaking of, I guess hands feeling it, and our cement mixing. Like, how do we?
Can you
Ashley?
tell the difference of color between these two hands? This one's darker, has more scratches. This is my working hand.
So we use
I don't
a
even want to show you my hands.
we use a
Yeah, mine are
variety of
pretty rough.
ways to like actually. So we plant the coral with trees. You dig a little hole, you put them in the ground, right? Like, how do we actually plant coral? Like, what's your favorite way, Ash?
We have different methods, but my favorite is the cement mixing and actually cementing the coral fragment down to the flat surface.
Yep.
I'm not gonna stop until you say the word I want you to say.
Don't say it.
What? What is it?
What
You know
shape
what
do we?
he wants you to
what
say.
shape
It's
do we
his
make?
Oh
for
my
it.
gosh.
These are for
I gotta
children.
mold some talkie balls.
I mean,
So-
they feel like it.
So we've found a way to mix cement in a way where we can manipulate it like a clay or like an epoxy, like a putty. Yeah. So we can instead of just pouring it or squeezing it out of like an icing bag, we can actually manipulate it even underwater. We can tear it into 2 pieces and have 2 smaller pieces. And the shape that we mold it into kind of looks like taki. And if you don't know Chamorro, it means poop. So we call them like cement taki, and that's how we attach them. And so it's a really cool budget-friendly way of doing this. So, and one of what I like to try to do in my work with the team here, I'm the only one that's not a biologist. I'm the only one that doesn't have my degree of some kind. And but I did have a poor childhood of me like making things and improvising things, and so that's what I bring. That's what I bring to the table here. So I like to try to work with my hands and figure out ways of doing things like the mixing of the cement.
He likes to work with his feet as well.
That's
Yes.
very
He
true.
literally hands us tools underwater with his toes. So I look over here and I see a foot. It's fair.
If my hands are full, like,
Your hands are not even full.
Yeah.
but
Let's
if
be
my
honest.
if my foot is closer, you guys should like get into it. Like we have like 4 limbs, and your toes are somewhat articulated. You can use them.
Yeah, until you're climbing up the boat and I see a foot in my face trying to get my fins.
I bet I have done that. That's a real
You
thing.
have.
Isn't it?
That's why I'm saying it. 30 times. I've counted.
It's like what's that? It's like Zoolander and Will Ferrell's character. He's like making his tea with his feet and everything. Like they're useful. They're useful things, and I'm gonna put my foot down on that. Ew! I just that was not I didn't do that on purpose. That just naturally lived there. Oh, yeah.
End of podcast.
Terminated.
Canceled.
All right. So what else? How else do we? Yeah, we used to use epoxy, but that was really expensive.
It's expensive
Yeah.
and
Messy.
And-
messy.
It smells.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but do we have like greater success using cement since it sets in a couple of hours compared to epoxy, which takes like in a day?
No,
Or-
epoxy will set pretty quickly too.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, both work okay. The coral, once it sets, the coral will grow over it, and so you won't even see that it's there. It'll get recruited with algae, so you know that it's not toxic. It doesn't leach stuff after it's, dried and settled. I think the main thing, well, we all know that when you work with like Z-Spar, which is the
epoxy.
stuff, the epoxy, it just gets into everything.
Yeah.
It's just messy. It's just really super messy. I mean, you're finding it in your hair and on your clothes and your rings and all that. But I think the main thing is the cost. That the cement that we've got is easy to work with. It's locally available materials. It's cost effective, and it doesn't create that big mess that epoxy does. And the cost is important because a lot of people, restoration efforts are sometimes criticized because they're so expensive, and they are. I mean, it's much cheaper to protect our environment than it is to destroy it and then have to repair it. I mean, we already know this, but we want our restoration stuff to continue. We want to be able to do it, so we have to find ways to do it cost effectively.
Yeah. So like one thing I'm pretty proud of myself for doing is I invented a thing I call coral kickstands.
Kickstands. Oh, you've done a lot of.
So
You're our builder.
It's a funny thing. So we have I guess she's about to graduate, huh? Claire.
Claire, yeah.
Yeah.
Claire Moreland Ochoa.
She's
Like,
not leaving. It's fine.
She's not leaving?
No.
Okay, great.
I'm not letting her.
So her project was to work.
She doesn't know yet, but
Her project was to work on blue coral, which are the most diva of corals, like to try to keep them alive, or at least inside the lab and in the nurseries. They seem to be okay when you do like direct transplanting, but the problem is you got to keep them standing up. So how do you keep something vertical in the water when the easiest thing to do is lay it down? And she asked me for help with this, and I just came up with like, all right, what if we just bend a piece of wire to hold it up? And it actually worked. We've had some problems before with rebar, which get all rusty and the coral absolutely hate. But the particular wire, I got lucky and that I found, and the coral actually, the blue coral actually just grew right over it, and then grew right over the cement too, which held it down. So that was pretty fun. So we're all about finding these kind of budget-friendly, low-cost solutions. And one of my personal motivations with the methods I try to develop or improve is being able to export them to countries and places that don't have the budgets that we can get with like federal money, right? So Philippines, Fiji, wherever, like what do they have locally available? What's cheap? What doesn't involve, very special tools or anything like that? And this is all the really fun stuff, all the hands-on building of things and working with the coral. The less fun stuff that I'll be honest, some people say there's like, those guys are just going to do another study. Like, what do they even do? Like, well, here's us doing the things. But the only reason we could do that was because of monitoring. And you guys do all of that. Anyone want to make a plug for monitoring and because it's so critical. Like we wouldn't be able to do anything if we didn't have these studies, if we didn't have these monitoring to say what the status of things are, how things are going. I guess how are things going?
Well, that's probably the number one question that I get asked when people hear about what I do. The first thing they say is, "Oh, okay, so how are Guam's reefs?" And if I wasn't out looking at them all the time, I wouldn't know the answer to that. We wouldn't know how much we lost if we weren't in the water measuring how much we've lost, and doing surveys and doing transects. You don't get to know your environment and your systems unless you're in the water looking at them or walking amongst the trees. So it's a really essential part of being a scientist is you do something and then you pay attention for a long time sometimes to what the effect of that thing is. I mean, that's basic science. You do an experiment, and then you do endless hours of repetitive data collection. So, you know, it's not always glamorous, but you get to know things really well when you're looking at them all the time.
Yeah. And this is just a beautiful example of that in like concrete and in action that, you know, we produce these years and years. I'm going to exclude myself from that particular of data collection and monitoring and doing these studies, and it led to us being able to do the kind of work we're doing now. And so if any of the listeners and viewers, you want to help, you can actually help with stuff. If you're just out snorkeling or paddleboarding or diving, if you see anything wrong on the reef, you can let us know and just report it. You can fill out a quick form, a quick report on eormarianas.org, whether it's a crown of thorns, whether you're seeing a lot of bleaching, whether you're seeing, honestly, even ghost nets, check in literally anything that looks really wrong with the reef. You can just leave comments, and we do check them, and we do respond to them. We are able to respond to a great variety of stresses, and whether it's either correcting it or going out and measuring it, and then if we can find the cause, we can try to correct the underlying problem. And so it's really important that we have all this information that allows us to do these kinds of actions. All right. So, all right, guys, before we wrap up, any last thoughts or anything we wanted to say we didn't get to say yet? Mosh, maybe you first.
Oh, boy. No, I think
You got it all?
I think we got it all. I think just getting that emotional connection with everyone in the community, getting people involved with ocean conservation, and speaking up for the ocean, I think that's the way for the future. That's it.
Okay. Ash, any last thoughts?
My work wouldn't be as fun as it is without the team that I have today.
Aw.
That's all. Don't step on the coral.
Lori?
Oh goodness, I don't even know where to start. No, I agree with I agree with everything. I am so proud to have this amazing team doing this amazing work, and I'm working really hard to try to keep it going. I want this to keep going on Guam for a long time. I think we can continue to do this work, and it's going to be good work, and it's going to be even more necessary with climate change.
Yeah, we got a lot of results already. 2,500 something of them.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, final plug before we go. July 3rd, Mauricio Pier Project, underwater cleanup off of Mauricio Pier by very own children of Guam, Will Naden and Leilani Sablan. So yeah, if you're a diver, please come out, support it. Use your skill, your hobby there, or your profession if you're a professional diver, to come out and give a little back to the reefs that give us food, they give us fun, give us jobs, and so much more than we can, I guess, really say in words. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.